Hello YouTube, this is Ariel Moon with a tutorial on how to cosplay as the dancing girl from Genius Party Beyond. I made this costume for an anime convention that happened last month, and I actually got a couple of compliments on it, even though I'm sure they had no idea who I was cosplaying as. I'm a new sewer, so self-taught. I was pretty happy that I did get some compliments on it because it wasn't very easy to make for me, and I did a lot of guessing with this. I started off by just drawing on a piece of paper so that I could see all the different parts of the costume and all the little bitty details. It's just a jacket with a sleeve and a skirt. The jacket was definitely the hardest to make. It has this striped fabric on the top, and then it's got the zipper, the main body of the jacket, then the sleeves, the little inset sleeves, and then the binding around all of that. The fabric I got was just a knit jersey made out of cotton. It's a t-shirt fabric. If you don't know what jersey is, it's just t-shirt fabric. I thought that would be best because I looked at what the girl was wearing in the anime, and it looked like it'd be something like a cotton, not silk or anything too stiff. And I knew cotton would be really good wear to a convention because it's cool and it won't wrinkle too much, and it's pretty easy to sew with. I didn't have a pattern to make for the jacket, so I kind of did with what I had. I had an old t-shirt that I ripped up, and you can see from this picture that I just ripped out the collar and then along the seam lines and then the sleeves. And I decided that would make a pretty good pattern for me to use. And I don't have a stand-up collar, so I went and I found an old shirt that had a stand-up collar, and I kind of used that to draft the pattern for it. I started off after I had cut the t-shirt up by folding it in half and laying it on the pale fabric. You'll notice the little yellow Sharpie lines I have to show where the stand-up collar would be, and then the little half moon that is over her butt with the little smiley face on it. So all those patterns are all drafted out and they're pinned and ready to be cut out. I used a rotary mat and a rotary cutter and some scissors for this project. Nothing fancy. And you'll notice on the back of the jacket, the little half moon doesn't reach the size of her waist. It's actually in about an inch. So I almost accidentally cut that off, so luckily I caught it beforehand, but the t-shirt was a little tight, and so it didn't have any seam allowance, so I gave it about half an inch just because that was easiest to measure. So I just cut half an inch around the entire pattern, and I cut it straight across the back instead of that little dip that you get in a normal t-shirt, because I knew I'd have the stand-up collar, and I didn't make that little insert that fills in that spot. If you notice on some shirts don't have it, but a lot of shirts have this little tiny little half moon, and I didn't really want to have to measure that out and make it, so I just cut it straight across, and it seemed to work out just fine. And on the front of the shirt, since it is a V-neck and my t-shirt was round neck, I just did a little straight Sharpie line just straight down, and it seemed to work out pretty well. And for the stand-up collar, I was afraid it was going to be too floppy with only 2 layers of fabric, so I also cut out some interfacing for the inside just to kind of stiffen it up. Measuring to make sure it would actually fit me was something I did constantly. I just measured across the just straight across to make sure that the width would be okay and it wouldn't be too tight, and then along the length so that I would make sure that the little half moon with the face on it hit right where it was supposed to do. And let's see, the fabric I used, like I said, was that jersey. I had a white jersey for the sleeves, and then the cream jersey for the main part of the jacket, and then for the binding around the bottom, and then the little face, and then on the sleeves, I just used this plain cotton. It didn't have any stretch, so that was something I actually realized a little bit too late, but I'll tell you more about that later on. I used this blue, yellow, black, red, and orange fabric for that, and I had a red 14-inch zipper. It's just a nylon coil, nothing fancy. So going on to the jacket, the first thing I did was make the top of the jacket that red and orange stripe fabric. So I cut out the strips. I think it was either 2 inches or 1.5 inches, and no, yeah, it was definitely 2 inches. And then I kind of sewed them all together in these long stripes and then pressed it open. And it looked like it was about right compared to what she looked like, so I laid the t-shirt pattern on top of that fabric and I cut out the two pieces, the front and the back, and I laid those out. I attached them actually by putting the right sides together and having the stripe fabric hanging down so that I could do just so a straight line right under the bust and then flip it up and press it flat. So I got that really nice seam line, and I didn't have to worry about making sure that it was like 1/2 inch sewn under, and then you couldn't see the seam line on there. And I did that on the back too. And on the V-neck on the front, I didn't want to use a sewing machine to sew that because I'm not exactly sure how to do a blind stitch on there yet. So I hand sewed the V, so the stripe fabric is actually just sewn to the cream color fabric on the other side so that you don't see any of the stitches in there. The next thing I did was the zipper. I know a lot of, if you get a pattern like from a College or Simplicity or one of those, they tell you to baste the zipper to your outfit so that it doesn't move. And then you have to take the basting stitches out, but I found you can just completely skip that step by taping the zipper to the fabric, and then the tape is pretty easy to pull out of the stitches, which is pretty good. So I put the zipper foot on my sewing machine and I just sewed up and down the sides and then across the bottom. I pulled the zipper up so that the top of the zipper was actually right at the V, and I have the little zipper tabs that stick up. I folded those under and then hand stitched those to the back of the striped fabric. So I only had white thread to do all this in. I didn't go out and I didn't bother to go buy different colored thread, but I had a bunch of Sharpies. I had a little rainbow of Sharpies, so I colored the thread in red, and it wasn't a perfect match, but it was pretty close, so you couldn't really see the different color until you got really up close to it. I thought that was slightly clever of me. So next I did the stand-up collar. I had cut those out of the striped fabric and the cream fabric, and I had sewn them right sides together. I sewed the two sides and then the top. And you can't see on this picture, but the interfacing is already on the inside. I sewed that to, I basted it to the cream fabric first. And when you do that, you gotta make sure that you don't catch the interfacing inside the top seam. Otherwise, it won't fold over very easily and it'll be kind of bulky. Something I realized, and then I had to pull the interfacing out, and then I had to redo that. So there you have the bottom. It's still open. I did baste that closed, but I put that right sides together. I opened up the jacket, right along the zipper. I took my scissors and I cut along the cream fabric on the back so that you could actually open it up. And I laid those two right sides together, the collar and the fabric, and I pinned it. And then I just sewed right across the top, and then I did another little row of stitches right around there too, so that it would be really sturdy and that it wouldn't fall apart. And when I ironed it open, I ironed the collar downwards so that it didn't have like an open seam. And I made sure that I caught all of the red and orange fabric inside there so that it didn't gap. That was one of the problems I was kind of worried I'd have, and I actually did have that problem when I was sewing the side seams of the jacket together. I had sewed the side seams of the jacket together, and the first time I did it, I wasn't paying attention, so I sewed the armholes closed. So, just a little word of warning, make sure that you separate your armholes out when you are sewing a side seam. With the side seam done, I decided to go on and do the bottom just the bottom binding. So I cut out the red, orange, well no, that's red, black, and yellow. And I did a little half moon. They're each 1 inch wide. That was kind of difficult for me to figure out how to do, but I finally did it. So I originally sewed that. I have the yellow tucked under, and I didn't bother to try to hide the seam on there. I just stitched it right over. And then I did the stripe around the front, and on that one you can't see the stitches either. I ended up just coloring those in with the Sharpie. I colored in the black, and the red, and the yellow, so you can't really see it. I was pretty much sick and tired of the jacket at this moment. It had taken me many hours. So I went on and I started the skirt. I didn't have a pattern for it, but it really wasn't all that difficult. I just measured how wide my waist was, or my hips were, where I was going to be wearing the skirt at, and then I measured how long it would be. So I took my waist measurement and I added several inches because I wasn't going to fit it. I just added some elastic on the inside band, and then I made sure that the bottom of the skirt was as wide as the fabric I had would allow it to be. And you'll notice that I kind of did a little curve. I didn't have a perfectly straight little edge right there, so when I sewed it together and then I turned the top under, threaded the elastic through, it turned out pretty well. The hem is slightly off on it, but it wasn't so much that you could tell. So I moved on to the sleeves then. I just laid out the sleeves on the white fabric, and I had cut around them. And the top sleeves of the jacket were about the size of how big a t-shirt sleeve would be if you just look at a t-shirt. So I didn't have to adjust the pattern on that. And it took me a little while to figure out how to do the sleeve. I sewed both on inside out by accident both times. So I had to pick it out before I finally got the trick to it, which is like sewing the you had to turn the fabric inside out, and then the sleeve was right side out on the inside of the jacket, so when you pulled it out, the edge of the stitching would be on the inside of the jacket and the sleeve would be right side out. So I think I had it down pat by the time I got to the smaller, thinner sleeves. So I kind of measured. I took the same pattern that I used, like the big t-shirt sleeve, and I measured just how long it would be down to my wrist and then how wide it would be going around my wrist. And I cut out the little binding edges on here, so the orange and the yellow and the blue. And I actually ran out of the red fabric, but on some of the sometimes in her in the anime you could see that one of her sleeves had orange on it instead of red. It was never really the exact same outfit every single time. There's always little tiny differences, so I decided, yeah, it didn't really matter if that was red or orange, so I kind of had the edge was that wide fabric so I wouldn't have to worry about trying to make it match to the inside of the sleeve. So here you can see how I kind of did that. I kind of had the fabric inside out and the sleeve was right side out, and it was along the inside of the jacket. And I did that by actually threading the sleeve through the jacket to make sure it was going the right way, and then I straightened out the armhole of the sleeve and then sewed it in there. I used my sewing machine to do that, and then I pulled it right side out and it fit. So the last part of it was doing the little face, and that was a bit of a pain in the neck actually, so because I didn't really, you just had to kind of do it by eye. So I cut out the top. I started off by cutting out the circle of white fabric, and then I cut out the top of the black, and that kind of made up the whole circle where the face was in. And let's see, I kind of you can't see in the picture, but I used pencil to mark out where everything should be, and that's how I cut out the eyes, the little red eye, and then the white eye out of the red fabric. and I used that little pencil mark to know how to cut it. And then I used a little yellow nose, and the little smiley face is actually made out of Sharpie. I didn't want to have to cut out that little thin piece of fabric because I knew it would kind of pucker when I sewed it on, so I just sewed it, made it out of red Sharpie, and then the black outline. And the last bit was just cutting out the yellow diamonds and sewing them on top. So then I went back and I made sure that all of the thread was colored in the appropriate color to match the outfit. So you can't see, but all of this was all used with white thread, and I just used Sharpie. And I did try it on, and it fit, but the hips, like that little stripe binding along the bottom, it just barely fit around me because that black, the red, and the yellow does not have any stretch at all. So it was just wide enough to fit over my hips, while the rest of it kind of is really stretchy. And I did get tons of compliments on it, and I was pretty proud of how I managed to finish that a whole month early, actually. It took me many, many hours to do. This wasn't a couple-day project. It took me several months. I started in January, and I didn't work on it every day, but I think I kind of finished around at the end of February, so that's pretty much all. I don't think I have any pictures. I know a lot of people did take pictures of me, but I didn't manage to get any pictures of myself. And plus, I don't really like having pictures taken of myself because I think I look kind of goofy, so thanks for watching, and if you have any questions or comments on how I could sew better and perhaps stop the seams from puckering, or for some reason the tension on my thread always got messed up. It started off like super loose, and then at like halfway point through when I was sewing, it tightened, so I had to pick all that out. I'm not sure what went wrong, but if you know what went wrong there, if you tell me, I would really, really appreciate that. Thanks.